Good day. My name is Stephen Parker. I'm Vice President of Public Affairs at Generator. We wanted to welcome you to this discussion hosted by the CMA Foundation. This panel is brought together today to discuss advocacy in music education and why we do it and how we do it. And as a big part of this conversation today, we're going to be discussing why we believe all students need to be advocated for, whether in urban, suburban, or rural communities. We are very pleased to be joined by the August Artist Ambassador for the CMA Foundation, Charlie Worsham, in addition to a few other special guests. But to get started today, I'm going to have each of the individuals on this panel introduce themselves, and I will start with Charlie Worsham, the CMA Foundation Artist Ambassador for the month of August.
Hey everybody, my name's Charlie Worsham. I grew up 100 miles south of Memphis, Tennessee, in a town called Grenada, Mississippi. I lived in Boston, where I went to college for a couple of years there, made a beeline for Nashville. That was 15 years ago. For 15 years, I've been making a living, making records and writing songs and performing those songs all over the country and all over the world. And I'm a big believer in music education. It is the reason I do what I do today, why I'm able to do what I do today. And my mom, who's here and will introduce herself as well as we jump into this, has played a pivotal role in that and in the work that we do through our North Mississippi music education program, Follow Your Heart Arts.
Thank you, Charlie. Now turning it over to Ms. Sherry Worsham, who's the Executive Director of Follow Your Heart Arts.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's great to be here. And yes, I am Charlie's mom, and I'm a longtime educator. I've been involved in schools in urban and rural areas for so many years, it's difficult to count them all. And I've been an advocate for teachers and for students, I think, all of my life, and I have a passion for music. So working with Follow Your Heart Arts has just been a natural, beautiful part of life recently. So it's great to be here and to be included in this conversation.
Thank you, Sherry. And also joining me is the only member of this panel not related to the Worsham family is Christopher Dye. He's the Advocacy and Government Relations Chair for the Tennessee Music Education Association.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much. It's great to be on with you all today. Yes, I do serve for Tennessee Music Education Association. I'm also the coordinator of music education at Middle Tennessee State University. And for me, this kind of advocacy is just part and parcel of my job and my passion. I want terrific music opportunities for every child in every community. And also as someone who teaches the next generation of music teachers, I want to make sure that my students get the support they deserve in their profession and in the field as they go out and try to make a difference in students' lives.
Great. Thank you so much, Christopher. Advocacy is always important in music education, but it's especially important this year. We have an incredible amount of funding that's flowing from the federal government to state and local governments and also to school districts. Just in education alone, since December, the federal government has allocated $200 billion, most of which has not been spent. And the federal government said to school districts and to states that they could spend that funding on music education. They explicitly mention music education. They also explicitly mention that musical instruments can be an allowable purchase using that $200 billion that's currently available to every single school district in the country. So the reason we're here is to talk about advocacy and why it's important, but I thought we would start with a fun question, which is, I'd love to hear what your first experience in music education looked like. So Charlie, let's start with you.
All right, I've got an official and an unofficial answer. So officially, I started taking piano lessons from a lady in our community. And that was coming after striking out at t-ball, being in karate, and my knuckles hurt once we started breaking the boards. And those lessons continued from kindergarten all the way through my high school years. And while I don't play piano often professionally, when I visualize music in my mind, I still see it laid out on the keys of the piano. And I'm convinced it's a big part of my doing well in school academically. But unofficially, this drum kit behind me belongs to my dad. And my earliest memory of music was him letting me sit in his lap and bang on the drums. And so I grew up in a musical home, and I believe in the unofficial as well as the official types of music education.
I love it. Thanks. Sherry, your first music education experience. Sherry, you're on mute.
My first music experience was on one of those little organs that you got in the dime store that was color coded, and it had the color coded books, and I taught myself to play. And later we were able to get an old used piano, and then we were able to hire the person at church that was the musician to give piano lessons. And from that, I actually studied music in college, and I taught piano lessons to help put myself through college in the early years. So I've just, it's been a part of my life forever.
Thank you. And clearly your experience may have been an inspiration for your son's piano lesson experience. That's great. Christopher, what was your first music education experience?
I was fortunate to grow up in a home with two band directors when I was a child. And so I've been immersed in music making as long as I can remember. I have pictures of myself as a child standing off stage in the wings with my Fisher-Price plastic saxophone, pretending to play along. And like Charlie said, I started piano lessons when I was young, and then started percussion when I was in middle school, and still continue as a percussionist today, and earned my stepfather's old drum set piece by piece by practicing through 6th and 7th grade.
That's great. Thank you. So we're here to discuss advocacy, and I really want to start with Charlie and Sherry. And a lot of artists, a lot of people who have been involved in music, that are currently involved in music, start their own foundations, and many times it's just to fund music education or to fund whatever they care about. And oftentimes it doesn't involve actually going to elected officials and policymakers and saying, we need more resources for what our organization works on. Follow Your Heart Arts does advocacy. It's a central pillar of your work, and would love to hear from both of you why you decided to focus on advocacy as a part of your work.
Yeah. Mom, do you want to go first? Do you want me
I'll take that. Well, first, we began Follow Your Heart, the arts program, because when Charlie was growing up, outside of piano, he had a natural interest in guitar, and it was obvious that he did. We got him a banjo, later we got him a guitar, but it really didn't change things for him until we found someone to give him instruction on those instruments, right? And some of that would transfer from piano, but we needed a teacher. So I drove him for all his life to far away places. 100 miles for a lesson was no big deal to us, and we were often driving to Nashville for lessons, which was much farther. So we had to seek teachers. When we had a chance to come back to the community here, the hometown community, that was certainly top of mind for the Follow Your Heart Arts program. That was our original goal, really small goal, was to get some guitars, find some teachers, and begin to offer lessons to students. What happened was that just opened Pandora's box of this box of understanding of a complicated, complex situation. It wasn't that there weren't teachers. It was that this more in-depth, complicated problem of challenges and barriers to music education and arts education. And so I felt that advocacy had to happen. I wasn't like born to be an advocate. Charlie came to me and said, the CMA supports advocacy. You need to go for this, Mom. I think we should try to do more outreach. I was already helping the students, in the schools. We would go to the city council, we'd get in the newspaper. We were doing that sort of outreach, but going to Washington, D.C. was a huge step. So I was encouraged by the CMA to do that. They gave us some funding, and boy, learning curve. It's been an amazing journey, but it's made all the difference. It really has. The outreach has changed. Probably everything that we do has been influenced by that one step, that courageous step to try going to the Capitol and, stretching what we envisioned as advocacy and promotion.
That's great. Charlie, did you have anything to add?
Absolutely. Part of that story of those banjo lessons, a couple of those years were actually funded by a grant from the state of Mississippi. And so we, since I was a child, we've known firsthand the power of advocacy in action. And there's a great quote I've been reading. I'm a big proponent of my home state, and I'm always reading a Mississippi book. And my new favorite quote about Mississippi, and I think Mississippi in particular plays into the conversation about advocacy, and this holds true everywhere, but especially in my home state. Mississippi is a place that many claim to know about, but few endeavor to understand. And when I hear that quote, what I think about is Mississippi's the home of the father of country music, Jimmie Rodgers. Where did he learn it? In the railroad yards. With who? From who? Black co-workers. White man learning the blues. You look at the king of the blues, B.B. King. What was he doing when he was where I was as a young person? He was a sharecropper. He went on to Memphis. He went on to change the world of music. Elvis Presley, king of rock and roll. Tupelo, Mississippi, Shotgun Shack. Where did he end up? Graceland. And the story continues from Charlie Pride to Tammy Wynette to the newest member of the Country Music Hall of Fame, Marty Stewart. And when we can go to the halls of power, especially those who represent a state like Mississippi, what we find on the walls in the offices of senators are blues festival posters and paintings of these great artists that are the greatest ambassadors of our state that our state has ever known. And that holds true for me touring internationally. When I go to other countries, they want to know about American music. It's American music. And so I just believe so much that for advocacy, plays a necessary role in music education because it's an easy sell. It's such a everybody wins kind of a thing. The investment is very low compared to the results you get. And the results you get aren't just continuing the legacy of a place and its music and its culture, but when you talk about urban areas, rural areas, and all points in between, next to the football games that everybody goes to at the high school stadiums on Friday night, you don't see people coming together from opposite ends of the community quite like you do in music education settings. And so I think advocacy is absolutely critical. It's not the only tool in the toolkit, but it is a necessary. It's like having that screwdriver, the Phillips head screwdriver. We still need a flathead, still need a hammer, pair of pliers, but it's one of the main ingredients in successful music education.
Thank you, Charlie and Sherry. Christopher, you just heard two folks talking about the importance of music educators in their lives. And obviously you are one of them and you work with them. How does advocacy impact the life of educators and how are they engaged in Tennessee?
I think music teachers have always done a terrific job. I think, as Charlie mentioned, bringing communities together and those kind of events and what that brings to schools and to organizations and communicating the value of music in those really active, demonstrative kinds of ways has always been a big part of what music teachers have done. As you mentioned a moment ago, Stephen, more recently, music teachers have had to put on a different kind of advocacy hat because of all of this new source of federal funding that historically those kinds of funding decisions were made at the state and federal level. And so our organizations would go and do a lot of that work for those dollars, for those districts, for those programs. And now that 90% of that $200 billion is being distributed at the district level means that all of our teachers are having to find that new set of tools, that new voice, that new vocabulary to talk about the nuts and bolts of how that federal regulation can turn into real meaningful financial support for their programs.
Thank you. And so this question is for all of you. And Charlie and Sherry have taken students to meet with members in the halls of Congress. Christopher, you're in the state legislature often. What message has worked? What has hooked those legislators and the different policymakers that you work with as far as getting them interested in education particularly music education, and getting them to want to give more resources to music education. Christopher, we'll start with you.
Sure. The first step, I think, is the universal appeal of music and the understanding of its role in people's lives. You almost never encounter someone who won't agree to the fact that music is a valuable part of life and important to our cultures and our communities. And that's a great way to start that conversation. I think for me, when I'm in those meetings, the two things I want to go from that kind of original agreement point, one is making sure I've got some specific asks that are going to connect that general sense of support to actions that are going to bring more immediate support to enhance music programs or to bring access to people who wouldn't have previously had access to those programs. And then the other thing that's really crucial on those is that there always has to be some human face, some human connection onto those. And so for us with TMEA, when we go to DC, we bring some of our collegiate music education students with us, and their testimonials mean a great deal and their passion for what they want to do in children's lives. And at the state level, we collect testimonials from a lot of our all-state musicians, so that when we go into any meeting with any state representative, we have hopefully at least one testimonial from a student in their district, so they can really see a constituent's point of view on just what those music programs mean in their lives.
Charlie, Sherry.
Okay, I can jump in there. You have to understand, when I began this, I had no idea what it meant to go to Washington, D.C. and to advocate. I mean, I was the person looking up the definition of advocacy and trying to read up about what you might do if you dared to visit, the Hill and knock on those doors. So my experience initially was to nurture relationships, to sort of survey the people that I knew in the community that I could call on to sort of help me get prepared to go. And I ended up dragging them with me. I brought one key person, was Trey Baker, who was our city manager, but he had formerly worked for Benny Thompson, Congressman Thompson, in DC. And so he was a definite, and I also stretched our group to administrators at school that all were very supportive of our program and had a decent music education program in the school. And I thought, well, we'll let them speak for that. And then I expanded that to include some of our teacher students. And so that first time we went, my goal was simply to learn, to enlarge the network, build relationships, and get prepared to come back, right? And I did learn a lot from all of that. We did build some connections. I nurtured those over time. And when we came back the second time, I took students, because you're right. The voice of a student is so important in those conversations. And by that time, we had gone from being, we're tiny grassroots. We started with 5 students and 5 guitars and a teacher from Delta Music Institute, 50 miles away, that was driving over. And by the time we were in DC, we had reached almost 200 students that we had grown. Surprisingly, like, we didn't expect that. We just were responding to the response to the program and just trying to build it as we were flying the airplane, right? And so the students, their voice was important. And the fact that there was such an interest in what we were doing, that it had caused our program to grow, needed to be shared with the leaders. I felt like I could talk about it all day, but when the students talked about the change that it had brought into their lives, when the teachers, we were beginning to train guitar teachers unexpectedly, we became like a teacher factory. Whenever those teachers explained, just having that open to them. And when we brought in the conversation of economics, music, business, industry, careers and jobs, that's when we really got people listening. So I'm still on a learning curve about advocacy, but I am a believer in advocacy, and I'm a believer in taking those students and keeping an open mind about how to build forward and plan for our next trip to the Hill.
It sounds like you've got it figured out, Sherry, between you and me. Charlie, anything to add?
Well, I would just say, because this is what Follow Your Heart did. But that right there speaks louder than anything, especially when the hands shaping that chord are really young hands, perhaps the hands of a kid who's at risk. And so it's those testimonials, and it's not to say, well, I started playing guitar and now I'm going to be Elvis. It's you know, I love to draw the comparison to athletics and funding for massive sports complexes, which are very important. But if you get a representative talking about the impact of team sports and why it's worth investing in those facilities so that children can have that opportunity, you can break it down into dollars, right? And numbers of students and what the impact is on a life. Well, they sell a lot of guitars for $100 or less. And that guitar is as good for a kid as any state-of-the-art sports complex, football stadium, you name it. It does all the same things. And so that's maybe, I haven't had a chance to advocate in DC in a minute, but that's always a favorite thing for me to go in there as the kid who was always in music, you know, who wasn't on the team. You know, we all get all this money to the football, folks. Let's buy some guitars.
I would say your success advocating with a guitar is probably going to be a lot better than the run-of-the-mill lobbyist like myself advocating.
Oh man, well, you know who does the best job? I think about the students I've met in our program who took up lessons about the time that their parents were getting a divorce or they were struggling in school, and then seeing them a couple years later. And like some of those kids are playing gigs around town now. And there's nothing I could do as a professional singer and songwriter that can top that kind of testimonial.
I have to add also, and this is something I was thinking about, Charlie, when you were sharing that, and that is, you know, we felt like the guitar and the guitar lessons that started a conversation, and it revealed to us, you know, resources we had in our community, but also gaps. And our advocacy grew from that, from trying to fill in those gaps. And in that, people became to more and more and more important to what we were doing. And the stories, the success stories of the students, very motivating. And, you know, when we get the letters or a parent sends us a video of their daughter, son or daughter being a part of a group in church or in a restaurant they're playing or in a college group, we just our hearts are so full when we get those letters. But when I was in DC, the last trip especially, our students and teachers worked together, and I didn't understand this before, but they became our new advocates. It's almost as if, you know, the problems that we're facing to help save our American music, the blues here, you know, there are no teachers here for blues. So I think it's right for me to say we're trying to save that. And we can't do that with our single program, a single action, a single trip. I began to see that this has to be the marathon, right? We have to look at what we're starting as a start, and we have to nurture in all of the lives that we touch, the parents, the educators, the legislative leaders, you know, policymakers. Everyone has to begin to understand how to advocate, how important it is. So I've begun, just like we began to see Follow Your Heart, initially was guitar lessons, then it was a teacher factory. Now I see it as a way for us to help the others learn that they've got to speak up. We have young people with a passion for music that are beginning to go into music education as a career. And I think our taking them to advocate in different places has helped them learn to do that. And it gives me this sense of, yes, there's somebody, you know, to carry this flag, because the problem is enormous. It's not going to go away. It took decades for us to get in this shape that we're in now with music education, a lack of funding, a lack of interest, a lack of understanding, a lack of support. And what's happened is communities suffer from that. And so in helping others, we help them build this community and learn about the benefits. But we need to be, getting that next class ready to come up and take our places, because it's far bigger than us and far bigger than what we're going to change. But I believe we will change it. This is how you do it.
It's incredible. So, when you all are going and perhaps those students are playing a song for their legislators or whoever they're advocating to, or you're having those conversations, what does success look like? Have you all been able to measure follow-up engagement from those legislators or from different government officials that you all are meeting with? Or is there just a great success story that you can point to where there was continued engagement with whatever elected officials you worked with? And this question really is for all of you. Sherry, I'll start with you.
We nurtured some relationships with the National Endowment for the Arts, but we also had some recommendations that came from the offices of congressional leaders that we visited. And so that kind of worked together. I learned, that's an important aspect of getting some grants, and the National Endowment for the Arts grant helps us with training teachers, which was very important. But what's interesting is the CMA helped us with the advocacy to get there to do that, and they've been partnering with this project too on the National Endowment for the Arts. So I found that to be a huge success. Senator Wicker posted the students playing at his breakfast, and our teachers and students played, and he posted that on Twitter. We got national attention. I was pretty pumped about that. And then our local, I have to put a plug in for our local city council. We always go to the city council and take our students and perform. It's a great opportunity for us to just get in the newspaper, share what we're doing, promote everything. And every time we go, they say, "Are you here to ask for a donation?" They're willing to give a donation. I've never taken it. I'm waiting for the big one, right? So I just keep nurturing and going there, and they love it when we bring the students in. That's a huge success for us, and I think that we'll have future partnerships here locally with them on some larger issues that we'd like them to maybe come in and fund. So that's a success story being built.
That's great. Christopher?
In my time with TMEA, one of our biggest points of emphasis early on was trying to get a fine arts coordinator reinstated in the State Department of Education. And we worked really closely with legislators in pushing for that, and with CMA Foundation. And we're very fortunate a few years ago to have that position reinstated. And I think we've seen some great benefit come from that. Along with that, we had, in partnership again with CMA Foundation, the State of the Arts grants, which was $1 million music education grant program that supported districts in all different geographical areas of the state. We've seen that state fine arts position help us to craft the return to school guidance last year in the wake of the initial wave of COVID. And those kinds of coordinated efforts really couldn't have happened if we hadn't really stuck to that initial asking point and pushing on those. At the local level in Tennessee, one of my favorite groups I always love to point to is a group out in rural Weakley County in the northwestern part of the state called Weakley Arts Can, which is led by some really passionate music ed advocates out there, Julie Hill and Katie Mantooth. And they, over the last 4 or 5 years, have developed an organization that's doing really great things, both within the schools and the community. And one of the things I think they've done best is to really raise awareness of how much shared passion there is around arts and that community, that they show up at plays and parades and farmers markets and community festivals and any other event that happens, and really highlight the ways that the arts are involved in all of those things, and encourage people to share their stories and do participatory things, making a drawing, singing, dancing, doing those kinds of things. And I think they've really fostered a great level of community support that they've now been able to turn into increased support for positions for music teachers in the elementary schools, and increasing momentum towards a really comprehensive music education for all the children in that community.
Thank you. Thank you all. Charlie, anything to add to that?
Oh, I'd love to. I can't speak as much to a concrete result beyond what my mom shared just a minute ago in terms of our elected leaders blowing open the doors and ushering in all of the solutions. But that's okay, right? I like to take the approach, I call it being Noah. And what I mean by that is we go and knock on their doors and we're like, looks like a flood might be coming. I'm building this ark over here. I'm just working on my ship. Just wanted you to know, not telling you to contribute. I'm not telling you to build your own ark. I'm just letting you know, looks like a flood's coming. Here's the ark we're building. And in terms of the ark we're building, my favorite and newest success story in the making, I see with Follow Your Hearts in particular, Follow Your Heart Arts in particular, comes from our recent day at the Grammy Museum in Cleveland, Mississippi. And for context, that's I said Cleveland, Mississippi, the Grammy Museum in Cleveland, Mississippi, because there are so many Grammy winners from Mississippi. And because across the street from that Grammy Museum is one of the newest and most world-class education facilities in a college in America that teaches music production. They have a massive recording studio, classroom, and a great educational staff at the Delta Music Institute at Delta State University. And we partner with them for many of our Follow Your Heart students going through the program. At the end of the program, when they tour the Delta Music Institute, that's the first time they're setting foot on a college campus. And we drive right through Louisville, Mississippi, which is one of the poorest counties in the entire country. And a lot of these kids don't live too far off from Louisville, both literally and figuratively. So for them to set foot on a college campus is huge. For them to see the history that they're surrounded by is huge. And then where I get to play a fun role is to stand on stage and say, hey, I'm the guy in the spotlight, right? But for every one of me you see, there are 100 other people doing 100 different jobs, from accounting to being a lawyer, to being a manager, a publicist, a photographer, videographers, all of the stuff. And so opening those kids' minds to, well, I may not be the world's best guitar player, but I think I want to shoot for a career in the music industry where I can be around what I love. And then in the midst of this day at the Grammy Museum, I'm going to close on this, but we brought in a friend of ours through one of our Delta Music Institute instructors who plays a lot of gigs with this guy, but a blues musician named Big T. And I played gigs with Big T when I was in high school. Probably shouldn't have been in that bar or whatever, but that was music education too. And Big T is carrying on the tradition of being a blues musician. His father was a part of a group called the Jelly Roll Kings. And that day I was with a videographer and we stopped on the way back to Nashville in Clarksdale. And I was like, you got to check out Red's. It's one of the legitimate juke joints here. Well, the historic marker in front of Red's reads about the Jelly Roll Kings and about Big T's dad. And Big T is now our newest instructor. And we're handing him guitars. He's going to find students. And we are helping on a frontline level to connect the people carrying on the tradition of the blues with the generation growing up in Mississippi. And it all comes full circle back to the landmarks with these historic markers that are a part of how our government runs, and a part of tourism, and a part of expanding young people's minds to, wow, this is where I'm growing up. I can be proud of myself. So it's all this really, really cool soup that it's a soup. It's the ark. We're building this ark. And one of these days when this flood hits, we might just knock on the door in the halls of power and they go, hey, how's that ark going? I'm getting really interested in ark building.
I love it. That's a great analogy. Just based on what you just said, Charlie, and the discussion we've had, music is foundational to all of us, and it should be foundational in the classroom, but unfortunately it's not. And Charlie signaled this at the beginning. There are a lot of inequities, but in particular, there is an equity in music. A huge priority for the funding that is coming from the federal level is equity. It's a huge priority for Congress on a bipartisan basis. It's a huge priority for the Biden administration as they administer these funds to states and localities. And so my question really to all of you is, how have you connected your message about the importance of music education to making sure that no matter your skin color, no matter your ability, no matter the zip code that you grow up in, no matter your parents' financial status, you should have access to music education as well. How has that message resonated? And also, what do you think we can do better?
I'll jump in. I have a real heart for this. I'll probably get emotional even talking about this because I do work in schools. It's part of what I do outside of Follow Your Heart and have done for years. And when our Follow Your Heart program started as an after-school program, we noticed that we didn't have equity. We didn't have African-American students signing up for our classes in equal numbers. And so the first year that bothered me. The second year, we began to recruit more intentionally. But that still did not change things. And I was watching others and trying to learn from others about what do you do? This is a problem. But the way we were addressing the problem we weren't getting the results we needed or wanted. So ultimately, I sat down and had, a grown-up talk with myself and said, go to them. I mean, why would we build something and expect the students to just show up and love it? Wouldn't it be a lot more human to go to where the students are and take the program to them? So we changed what we were doing. We changed the way we offered lessons, and we started reaching out into the African-American community and going into the churches and going into the places where they were and where music was, and partnered with them. And that began a new era in what we were doing with Follow Your Heart Arts. We began to focus on and to look, it allowed us to see other opportunities like that we really hadn't considered before. And I began to think and see a lot of the outreach that I'd done myself and other times in life as an educator as probably being ineffective, but was largely because I had refused to kind of meet them where they were. Instead, I was a little bit arrogant about, well, we've built this, you should come. Well, no, we need to do a little bit more in looking at what the needs, interest, and resources, gaps are, and take our program and programs for music education to the students we want to serve. And now we have recruited several minority, several girls, females, several different races. We have several different races of teachers that are involved in our program now, and we're serving students in places other than just in the after school program and at school. And it's wonderful, but it required us to look at what we were doing differently and to be willing to change,
Absolutely. Charlie, Christopher.
I would jump in for sure. And I just want to say ditto to everything she just said. And I would make the argument to whoever might be listening at whatever point in time that music is the best opportunity to address some of the hot topics of today. How we teach our history you see in the news a lot, and you see people getting up in arms, and we seem to be at opposite ends of a tug of war over something that we shouldn't be arguing about. It's history, it's our story. And what's unique about music as an opportunity to bridge this gap is, it's no accident the first thing I talked about was Jimmie Rodgers, white man, father of country music. But what was it about Jimmie Rodgers that made him such a big deal? Well, he sang blues. Where did he get that blues? He got it from people that he worked with in the rail yards who were not white. Now we're talking. We're connecting parts of the community that have for far too long been segregated, officially or unofficially. And music is this great, because music is a safe place. It's fun. Everybody loves to talk about music and records. And this record behind me right here, another example with a Mississippian on the cover, Pop Staples, that is Freedom Highway, a record made in a church, recorded live by the Staple Singers in the 60s, in the middle of the civil rights movement. right in the heart of Chicago, produced by a Nashville producer, Billy Sherrill, featuring pop staples who grew up right around Dockery Farm, which is where the blues were born. And the song, the title track to that album, Freedom Highway, he wrote, he said, if Dr. King can preach it, we can sing it. And he wrote Freedom Highway about everything happening in Mississippi. A lot of it was happening in Mississippi where he had grown up. And so you could teach a course on American history just from that one song and that one album right there. And that's a Mississippi version. There's a Tennessee version. There's a version for Texas. There's a version for every part of our country and every part of our story. And it's a way to talk about history, a way to open people's perspectives up that doesn't instantly make us talking heads yelling at each other on the television screen. And so I don't know anything else that is as well suited to break down those divides in our communities today.
We need more people to hear that, Charlie. Thank you. Christopher.
Absolutely. And thank you, Charlie, for that. That was terrific. I think another aspect that's so important to me as we look at music in our schools and with our children too, is that we have been, I think, really working as a music education profession to expand the kinds of music and the kinds of music making and music engagement that children can participate in schools. That, you know, the historical models, which I love, of bands and concert choirs and orchestras are terrific, but we've seen so much growth with guitar, with popular music instruction, with beat making and hip hop and mariachi and steel bands, and so many different cultural elements that reflect the different communities that exist within our state and our country, and also reflect the different perspectives that students can encounter, right? That there's different cultural values and different norms and things that really expand students' viewpoints. And those kind of conversations that Charlie was talking about that can be started by engaging with those musics are really important.
Thank you.
Christopher, I just have to say, I'm so glad you said that. And yes, because hip hop is folk music. Folk is found art, right? Well, when you're growing up in a city, there are not banjos and fiddles lying around, but there are records and turntables, and you get creative with them. And these are the tools with which a new American art form, arguably the most popular of American art forms today, was born. And so, yes, music is you can hold a banjo here and a turntable and a beat here and say, these are both folk instruments. Let's talk about it. And providing that as an education opportunity. Because I was a band student. I was in marching band. I was in concert band. I was in jazz band, but I played in bars on the weekends. And in the summertime, I go to bluegrass festivals. I play wherever I could. They're all great starting points, all equally worthy music education opportunities, man. I cannot second that any more than I am. Let's shout that from the rooftops, man. That's good stuff.
Thanks, Charlie. Absolutely. And really to the access point too, that, I mean, how many of our students have that piano in the living room today versus how many of them have a beat maker in their pocket, like ready to go, right? They can start mixing, they can start expressing themselves.
That's right.
Amen. Amen. So our audience are the thousands of teachers across the state who are members of the Tennessee Music Education Association. So, you know, our hope for this is this has turned into an incredible conversation. And you have heard what advocacy really is, which is it's data, it is structure, it's narrative, but it's also storytelling. And you've seen all those aspects today. But if we're going to turn this last couple of minutes of the time we have together into a toolkit for those music educators to go out and advocate so that we can have more funding in Tennessee and hopefully across all states for music education, what's the one piece of advice you would give them to make them successful in advocacy? Sherry, let's start with you.
Oh, wow. That's somewhat easy. And that's partnerships, relationships. I mean, you cannot build enough partnerships and relationships. We partner with anybody. We'll talk with them and we'll partner with them because everybody in a community has something to bring to the table. And you can't give it away like that. It doesn't come back to you 1,000 times over. There's no good that we've done in Follow Your Heart Arts that hasn't come back to us 1,000-fold. So the partnership nurturing building of a network would be where you need to begin. And we're grateful for the CMA. They've been like one of the main reasons why we're here today is the CMA and their support of us when we had 5 students all the way up to when we were dealing with 100. We obviously partner with the Grammy Museum, with Delta Music Institute. So look around you and draw from all of the resources, but have new eyes for looking at what groups could be a resource for you as you're reaching out and advocating for music education. You'd be really surprised at how many people are interested in music education, but they're working in worlds where it's not even connected to them, but they've got this huge personal story about the impact music has had. So we measure, at least I do, success by all of these individuals that we're influencing, and they are individuals that are all over the place. I've never met a parent, a teacher, a business leader, a government official, someone as part of an organization that wasn't important to our mission and could not be a part of moving our mission forward. So individuals, partnerships, and just get out there and just try it, man. Just give it a go. You're not going to fail. You'll be surprised.
Christopher?
Absolutely. And to that end, in terms of Tennessee, a terrific organization that we've been partnering with at TMEA is Arts Ed Tennessee, which is a coalition of our organization along with our colleagues who teach visual art and dance and theater across the state and several music industry partners. The idea there being that there is strength in numbers and we share a lot of common goals for what we want for students. And so understanding that those kinds of community building and working across groups can be really helpful. The other thing I would say is I think sometimes the idea of engaging in some sort of formal advocacy feels really intimidating, but it is as straightforward. Once you've got some of those tools and understand what some of those opportunities are, the rest of it's as straightforward as just sharing your passion. It's just talking about the things that matter most to you, which for music teachers, for parents in those communities, that's a very straightforward thing, right? That's nothing is more natural than just sharing that passion, and that always comes through.
Charlie?
I had to look it up and I found it. I don't know if y'all are Indiana Jones fans, but there's a scene in the one with Sean Connery, who plays Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones' dad, where they're getting shot at by these planes that have machine guns on them and stuff, and they got nothing to fight back with. But Sean Connery's running from the airplane on the beach, and he opens his umbrella, and a bunch of birds fly up, and it ends up getting in the propeller and crashes the plane. Anyway, he says, "I suddenly remembered my Charlemagne. Let my armies be the rocks and the trees and the birds of the sky." And what I mean by sharing that quote, and this is my advice to teachers who are watching, who are going out there to advocate, whether you're talking to the president of the United States or the superintendent of your school or a city council person, anyone in any capacity, when you're advocating, your rocks and trees and birds of the sky. And I've talked a lot about Mississippi, but let's talk about Tennessee. That's your Dolly Parton. That's your Lower Broadway, Nashville, Tennessee. That's Graceland in Memphis. It's all of this great American music and this story and this heritage and history that we have. And it can feel, when you're advocating for music, a lot like all you're getting funding wise is rocks and trees and birds of the sky. But that really is the power of what we are dealing with here with music. And we should not, we should stand tall when we advocate, and we should act like we have already earned every penny and then some of that $200 billion. Like, that's ours. That's ours. And we don't need to apologize for it or be sheepish about it, because like I said, we've got our trees and rocks and birds are Dolly Parton and, you know, Miranda Lambert having the first female run honky tonk on Broadway, whatever it is. But those icons of music are our armies and we've earned this. And so stand tall.
Thank you, Charlie. And I will, since you're a history fan, and I am as well, my one moderator's piece of advice is actually, it comes from something that I saw for the first time earlier this week. I was in Seneca Falls, New York, which is where the first women's convention happened in the 1840s. And they came up with a declaration of sentiments. And the final line of that declaration of sentiments is actually one of the best advocacy plans I've ever seen. And I'm going to briefly read it now. And the reason that they met was so that they could finally get the right to vote. And it took them 80 years to get it from the moment that they met. But this is their advocacy plan. In entering upon the great work before us, we anticipate no small amount of misconception, misrepresentation, and ridicule, but we shall use every instrumentality within our power to effect our object. We shall employ agents, circulate tracts, petition the state and national legislatures, and endeavor to enlist the pulpit and the press in our behalf. That is an advocacy plan, and that's the same advocacy plan that we use nowadays as advocates. CMA Foundation is using it, Charlie and Sherry are using it, Christopher is using it, and combined with what they just said, that's a great plan moving forward. Any final words before we let you get back to your lives?
I just want to thank y'all so much for putting this together, and it's a real treat to be here with my mom, and I'm excited to see what unfolds.
Yes, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Worshams. It's been terrific to get to hear from y'all and get to know a little bit more about y'all today, and share that passion that you have for bringing music into kids' lives.
I'll echo the big thank you to everyone. It's just a privilege to be here and to be asked about what we're doing, and also just to say that, you know, we're investing in people. You never go wrong. You never go wrong with people and music, and we're here to just make communities stronger and better, and music is the secret sauce. So do what it takes. It's worth it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you for everything you're doing for Tennessee. I will just say, my grandparents were born in Cleveland, Mississippi, and my mom was born in Greenwood, and my family's from the Mississippi Delta, and they were all musicians and music fans. So thank you both, Charlie and Sherry, for everything you're doing for my home area. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. Please engage the Tennessee Music Education Association if you're interested in learning more about advocacy. And also, please engage CMA. Charlie Worsham is our CMA and artist ambassador this month, and we hope that you'll engage with both of our organizations to push for more music education funding across the country. We'll see you soon.